Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Victoria. I'm speaking from Abuja, Nigeria. And today I'm glad to be sharing with you my story, being a female engineer in Nigeria so far. I'm going to start with the journey and how it all started. So growing up in Kaduna, Nigeria, my favorite phrase was always up never, and you will come to know what that means. So usually with nightfall came darkness, and we were forced to make do with dimly lit candles, which often led to fatal accidents. So over time, most families promoted the tradition of laying outside in the mud, under the moonlight, telling stories and patiently waiting for the National Electricity Power Authority to restore power. But what was really interesting was how much joy came to the entire society or community when that power was restored. It was just great seeing the light bulbs in our homes glow again. You could see that there was just an array of possibilities, and it just brought a sense of completeness to the entire community. And this was a time when we didn't have diesel generators. So these days, people could easily get diesel generators, but then it was only the high and mighty who could afford that. So yes, the availability of electricity meant so much more than even, now where people can actually afford some other sources of electricity. And as a little kid, I was usually very curious, and I always asked tons of questions like, if this electricity brought us so much joy, why don't we have it all the time? Well, I would ask the elderly people who were around me, and I would get told, well, welcome to Nigeria. And they pretty much just brushed me off. As time went by, I encountered many other problems that I thought were related to the lack of electricity. And I just thought, you know what? Since pretty much whenever I ask these questions, I'm told there's pretty much nothing I could do about it, I decided maybe I could study aeronautic engineering and fly away, build my planes and fly away from all these problems. Until I saw a documentary on how planes are made, and that was how that dream pretty much died. But I was lucky enough to have a tutor who sort of suggested that I should consider electrical and electronics engineering. And his pitch was, with this course, you would be able to develop solutions to problems. It pretty much gives you that foundational knowledge that you require to come up with solutions to the problems that you've always wondered about. And I thought, that's fantastic. So I went for it. So in the first year of studying engineering, there was five of us females. And by the second year, we had dropped down to just 3 in a class of over 50. I didn't know what this meant at the time. But then one time I was on a train ride with my uncle, and he had said to me, are you still studying engineering? With a tone as though I was expected to drop out of studying engineering for some reason. Well, I pretty much brushed his comment off and just continued to pursue or sort of find solutions to a problem that I was very much aware of how much it stifled a lot of untapped potentials in my community. And this problem became the basis for my final year project, which eventually won awards for exceptional performance in innovation and best use of research. And at this point, I was like, looks like I'm onto something. So I wasn't about to stop. And studying in the UK sort of also gave me an opportunity to see what it looks like, what a country would be like with constant electricity. And I started to think, you know what, if it's possible here, then I must be able to take it back home somehow and contribute to, solving that problem that I know has really sort of held a lot of people down. But not so fast. When I got back home to start to practice engineering, I was faced with a few problems. And these were problems I wasn't prepared for. It was pretty much realizing that there were societal perceptions of what a woman should do and should not do. As I began to grow, to gain experience in the engineering field, I realized it was sort of a big deal for a female to be an engineer. And I'll get asked questions like, well, why engineering? Are you sure you have the muscle for it? And the most interesting of all was, you get patronizing comments as to whenever I mentioned what my profession was. And many people would say, you don't look like an engineer, or you don't dress like an engineer. And I honestly believe that such societal conditioning has sort of contributed to the falling numbers of female engineers worldwide. Well, my take on this whole subject is that engineering in of itself is not gender-based. Pretty much engineering is being able to look at a problem and analyze it and come up with solutions. And I don't think there's any reason why one gender should be able to do that as opposed to the other gender. So, but I think that because a lot of men got to the field first and they were able to just make it their own, it's just like walking into a room full of men, right? But there's nothing that says that women can't do the same. There's nothing that says that, women can't carve out a space for themselves in that industry. Now, being a female engineer, I had to sort of understand that I was sort of a pioneer. So a lot of this was not expected of me. And therefore, you would have to deal with challenging situations such as your capability being doubted and being told, for example, oh, you can't attend that meeting because it's too technical for you, or, even dealing with the gender pay gaps. What I've realized rather is that these are some of the factors that translate into why there's an increasing number of women in the industry who experience the imposter syndrome. Because when you then become an engineer and you're able to do all of these things, and like sort of the society doesn't expect it of you, it's sort of that situation where you're saying the truth, but everyone else says it's a lie. And then you're sort of like, well, what's going on? But what I've learned is as a female engineer, your North Star needs to continuously guide you. So the reason why you went into the course, into this field, needs to constantly be at the forefront of your mind. For me, I didn't try to defend my capabilities. I pretty much just concentrated on learning and developing more skills to make myself valuable, not just to any particular place or organization, but even to myself in general. And the way I was able to overcome these stereotypes was by focusing on issues that I felt passionate about, which is empowering communities through energy access. This way, my truth remained with me and I was able to draw strength from it. Now, throughout my career, I've been able to work with industry experts and innovative solutions in coordinating the delivery of several strategic projects within the largest solar program in Nigeria. And this program has impacted millions of lives, especially in the health and education sector of rural and hard-to-reach communities. And one of my proudest moments being an engineer was the final inspection I had to do for the first project I monitored. It was just so exhilarating going into the hospital and seeing that there was a completely different ambience where women and children received better healthcare because they had electricity. It's amazing how much difference just the ambience of light can create, right? And to think that certain equipment wouldn't even work without this power that's required. Well, as fate will have it, that project was to power 34 primary healthcare centers in a hospital, 34 primary healthcare projects in the same city where all of this started for me, in Kaduna, where I was born and raised. So for me, that was something I was really, really excited about. I'll just take a moment to talk about my organization, M1 Energy Solution. is an engineering and technology firm that has designed and developed sustainable energy solutions and smart electricity infrastructures in Africa for over 10 years. M1 has been able to combine innovative technology with human capital to focus on solving energy-related challenges that affect millions across the continent. Now, working with the execution team as a project associate at M1, my colleagues have a saying, an engineer is an engineer. Hannah, sorry, that's the previous slide. If you could just go back to it for a moment. Thank you. So they do have the saying, an engineer is an engineer, indicating that my capabilities are not hindered by my gender. Now, being a female engineer in Nigeria and having the opportunities to participate in meaningful and impactful work can be very rare. Hence, it's vital for female engineers to find an organization that plays a role in building the leaders of tomorrow and whose values align with yours. Because without this, developing yourself can sort of feel like a contraction to your work, whereas it really should be a complement. And at M1, there are dedicated programs focused on capacity building, mentorship, and female STEM training, with significant contribution to a young engineer's professional and development and personal development, I mean. You can, next. So being a female engineer or being a female in the engineering field, it almost is expected of you to, continually try to prove yourself and compete in skills, but that would not be authentic to me. So I found my strength in humanizing and motivating colleagues by reminding them of the meaningful impact of the work that we do. And doing this has helped me in coordinating the delivery of several strategic projects. I have a saying that although engineering is technical, the outcomes actually impact real lives. So although we put in countless hours into designing, engineering, and the actual construction of these projects, it's so fulfilling to know that in the end, it all goes into empowering rural communities and providing energy access, especially for healthcare and education in conflict zones and hard to reach communities where the lack of energy or electricity has very severe consequences. As a female engineer or as a female African engineer, I hope to achieve, continue to contribute to the solution so far, and to also be a source of inspiration to others after me. And in my bid to achieve this, I've had to stay resilient through challenging situations and keep my drive for eradicating energy poverty in Africa. Coming up with creating change is not cheap. It doesn't come easy. So it's essential to sort of have faith in the dream and continuously build skills to position yourself as a contributor to the change that you want to see. And my advice to young women who are interested in STEM, but a bit hesitant, maybe because you think you will not be accepted, or maybe you don't have the technical expertise required. Well, what I would say is, don't sweat it. Just do it, because there's nothing more empowering than knowing that you have the tools required to sort of contribute to solving a global issue or a global problem. And especially you would be contributing from a female's perspective, which in many cases could be different from what the other people on the table could be seeing. So that's pretty much my sort of call to action for young women in sort of meeting up and putting hands together and coming on board to sort of meeting the SDG goal. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Victoria. I cannot wait to ask my questions and dive in a little deeper, but for the sake of time, to make sure we get to everyone's questions in the Q&A, I will turn now to Barbara And just let everyone know, again, you can add your questions for our two amazing speakers as we go along. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, and hi, everyone. I hope you can see my presentation. My name is Barbara Rubin, and I am a lawyer, Brazilian lawyer in São Paulo. And in case some of you don't know, and that's okay, São Paulo, it's not the capital of Brazil, but it is a mega city from Latin America, a region in the world in which only 20% of the workforce in the energy sector are women. And if we go to the C-level positions, women represent less than 7% of all those positions in the energy sector. That makes Latin America one of the regions in the world most unequal in terms of gender in the sector we work in or we want to work in. I like to believe that very early in my life, I have decided to challenge this number. But if I'm to be honest, that's not exactly true. And it started more like 10 years ago, but I would like to rewind to my story a bit before that. So when I was 15, I have decided to join Greenpeace in Brazil and become their volunteer. And as their volunteer, I have done pretty much anything you can imagine a Greenpeace volunteer would do, from garbage collecting to dressing as a tree, which was pretty easy, to joining nonviolent direct actions, and even resigning from a civil servant position that I used to fill to join one of their ships as a sailor for 3 months. And the moment in which I joined this ship is very special for me because it's actually when my story starts to intertwine a bit more with the energy sector as I transition from being a Greenpeace volunteer to their climate and energy campaign. And by that time, I had just graduated, and the work I used to do at Greenpeace in the energy sector had nothing to do with my actual background, which was in law. And as one of Greenpeace Brazil's spokesperson for energy-related matters, I had very early in my career and actually very early in my age, been exposed to debates, press conferences, meeting with decision makers, and so on. And that was around 2013 for you to have an idea. At that moment, gender itself wasn't alone the only challenge I faced. I think it's fair to say that it was combined to the factor that I usually was the youngest one in the room as well. Well, the only exception was when we have developed the Solar School project, which is the picture you see up here, and which most of the people that were actually engaged thought I was one of the 12 years old students for the school we were installing solar panels in. So I got very much used since my early 20s to believe that, to people thinking that I was the intern and not the coordinator of the project, or someone's daughter that happened to be at the meeting for a mistake. That happened several times. And when they realized that I wasn't, I was usually the Greenpeace girl and not the specialist or the expert at the energy topic that I was working on. And as much as that bothered me at that time, I don't think I care that much because it never made me stop, because I knew just how much what I was defending was important. And I think that's something that also resonates a lot to what Victoria said. So I think the fact that I never stopped positioning myself was also the reason why when I've decided 5 years later to transition my career from third sector to the private sector, I got a good job or a good job positioning offer at a private company, a renewable energy private company, because by that time, the sector kind of knew me because I was the girl from Greenpeace who was always protesting towards something better public policies for renewable energy. But I was also known for being very strong-minded and very assertive in my positionings. So 5 years passed and I have joined this renewable energy company. And the company was very progressive and I have joined as their innovation and strategy coordination. But I was very surprised when I actually joined it to realize that I was the only woman in the decision-making team of the company. And to also realize that men closer to my age at the group were at least 10 years older. And although they did respect me for the background that I had built in the energy sector, I frequently hear things like, you're too young to understand this, or you don't have enough experience in the private sector because you're third sector minded, and things like that. And I remember one day when I told my manager that I wasn't adapting to the city I had to move to, I heard from him that the reason for that was that I still hadn't got a boyfriend there. And I think that was kind of the moment in which I realized that I started to feel very much out of tune with the place I was in. And I wasn't 25 by that time. And it can be very confusing to realize that you're in a place that can look very much familiar to you, but strange at the same time. There were criticisms on the way that I should position myself, deliver my work, and even offer or not support to people who would come and ask. So that's when I have decided to transition again and start my own company, which is called Bright Strategies, and is a consulting firm dedicated to support investors in developing better business models for renewable energy. And because throughout this journey that was now, I think 7 or 8 years, I didn't lower my voice, and I never stopped defending what I believe was right for the sector, in spite of people telling me that I should have because I was only a girl. In 2018, I was elected the vice president of the board of the Solar Association. And I know that that's probably where you think that, okay, so that's when your problems end, right? I mean, let's face it, you're the vice president of the association. What else, or what kind of challenges can you face in the energy sector when you held this title? But in many ways, I would say that's actually when my challenges got enhanced, because when I was at Greenpeace, people used to see me as the third sector or the Greenpeace girl. And when I was at the private company, I was only making statements or decisions oriented towards that company. And now, many of the people I was relating myself with needed to see me as a specialist, and more than that, as a peer of their own when it comes to decision making, or when it comes to actually pledging for some kind of improvement towards the solar sector in Brazil. And that was actually a very interesting and a very moving, I would say, journey, because throughout the moment in which I started to being the vice president until very recently, I went through it all. I ran through all the not so funny jokes about how I was garnishing the round table, or gossips about, I don't know, some kind of sexual preferences, because how can a woman possibly be surrounded by men and not engage herself in a relationship with any of them? That, I mean, there must be something wrong. And throughout that, I think my position was always just to keep focus on the work that I was doing and to try to get myself as improved in my capacity and in my technique and in my field of specialization, which is regulation in the energy sector, as I could. Until one day, I have attended a conference that I was speaking at, and it was far from my home. So that meant that I was staying at the hotel in which the conference was taking place. And after the conference ended and there was a dinner for the speakers, one of the participants, a man, followed me into my room. And the thing he wasn't expecting is that I was actually sharing a room with a colleague from the sector. So thank God nothing happened. But I can only describe that experience as being scary as hell, as you can imagine. And I think that was the moment in which I realized that being silent wasn't an option anymore. And that sometimes we do need to step up and we speak out on things that are happening if we actually want to change the sector. When I started to face some kind of challenges for being a young woman in the energy sector, and I know that there are so many more women out there that face much more difficult challenges than the one I faced, but I was so young that I think that by that time, not bending myself was already so much effort for me. but I'm not that young anymore, and the world has changed so much, and there's so much more we can do. So we can advocate for more equality amongst gender, not only in the energy sector, but overall in our social network. And that's something I have started to do. And if we can't find change in the world where we live in, then we can create change ourselves, which is something we are trying to do in our company, in which what you see here is an image of part of my team. But we do prefer to hire women that are either students or single mothers, and therefore need more flexibility in their work in order to be able to perform their other duties. We can advocate for change in our social networks among our colleagues and families, and sometimes we need to create the change ourselves. So change comes in several ways, and one of them, I do believe, is talking, inspiring, and supporting, and that's something we all can do, and that's also why I feel this panel is so important. I'm happy to realize after 10 years in the Brazilian energy sector that things are changing, that in several occasions, I am not anymore the only woman at the table, but that we are also learning how to build and to institutionalize networks of support for women. So for example, what we have now is the MESOL, which is the network for women working in energy sector, which both supports in capacity building, but also supports in women that somehow face some kind of emotional or other assaults and need support. And the other movement is a movement that it's called Yes, They Exist. Which aims to actually raise awareness to the number of highly skilled women that we have in Brazil that are ready to take leadership positions, but we actually need somehow that there is a way that they can pave to get there. And although all these changes has come, I haven't yet have a silver bullet solution for gender issues in the energy sector. But looking back, if I could say, I think those are three things that actually made the difference for me. So first, I was never afraid to ask questions, no matter how young, how junior I was at a discussion, or how junior people thought I was at a discussion. And I was never afraid to ask questions, but I was also never afraid to take my seat at the table. And that meant making my positionings when I thought they were relevant, even if people didn't mean to intend or to take me seriously because of my age or because of the fact that I was only a girl starting at the sector. And the last point that I think was that helped me a lot was looking for inspiration in and within your path. And again, I think that also it also resonates for me a bit about what Victoria said, like remember what moved you to do that. And remember why you're doing what you're doing and do what you love doing. Because I think the path will always have challenges, especially when we're talking about disrupting sectors that are very conservative. But when you're very much matched to your position or to your beliefs in that, it gets easier. And it also gets easier when you're able to build a network of support. So throughout the journey, of course, it wasn't all difficulties. I've made incredible friends, and I found people that were older than me, many of them men as well, but they were willing to mentor me and support me throughout my journey in spite of the challenges. And I think if we surround ourselves out of these people, breaking the ceiling glass for sure will be easier and will also hurt us a bit less than it would if we were doing this by ourselves. And I think for finishing, I like to leave a poem from Rubim, which says, I stand on the sacrifices of million women before me thinking, what can I do to make this mountain taller so the women after me can see farther? And I hope that is a challenge that motivates us all in our daily journey in the energy sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Barbara and Victoria, for sharing your stories. I'm seeing a lot of really, a lot of nice messages in the chat that people resonate with these stories and have been through similar experiences. And while that is, on one hand, heartbreaking to see that so many people have had similar, either roadblocks or difficulties finding their path, I think it's really a testament to this conversation, and really appreciate you sharing your story so that we can kind of identify, oh, I'm not alone in this, and other people have powered through difficult times as well. But I'm seeing a handful of questions that I think we can tie together about maybe mentors that you've had or inspiring women that have supported you along the way. Perhaps it's not even women. Barbara, you mentioned some male mentors that you've had as well. And then Sherry also asked, have you been able to help other women? Have you been able to find opportunities for you know, I think you both have around 6 years in the sector, so appreciate that it's not a ton of time, but have you found opportunities to bring others along with you as well? It's quite a vague, broad question, but I wanted to kick off since I think a couple of people are mentioning it. I'll let either of you decide who wants to go first.
Okay, so I'll go first. So for me, helping other women, what that looks like for me is encouraging women in the field. So when there's a younger person who's just joined and is also trying to do the same thing, I just sort of show them that there's hope. And even though you go through difficult situations, it's fine because that's expected anyways. And then you would get through it. You would start to make impact that would start to encourage you as you go along. So so far, that's how much I've been able to assist and encourage other women. And again, when you say encouragement, sometimes you don't need to do much. Someone just needs that beacon of hope to know that everything will be fine eventually. Oh, sorry. Also, sorry, Barbara. You had mentioned if we had gotten a mentorship and you know, encouragement ourselves as we went along. Yes, definitely. In most cases, I have with, you know, male colleagues and even some female engineers who have gone years and years ahead of me to just sort of encourage and let you know that, look, it's going to be fine. So one time I had to speak with one of my female mentors at a point where I just thought, this isn't working. And when she related her story to me, I thought, okay, I haven't been through anything and I can't afford to give up now. So it's always important to have that kind of mentorship to just let you know that, look, it's going to be fine and you should just keep going.
Yeah. Well, yes, I had mentors as well, as I've mentioned, that I still carry with me, that I still support me, and I try to check in with them often. I think it's important to have someone that near you that can offer advice, a piece of advice or a word of encouragement. And I feel very lucky to have had those throughout my career, my journey. But I think I was never afraid to ask for help. For, you know, that's also how I got my mentors. No one came to me and said, hey, I want to be your mentor. So I think that's something sometimes we need to ask. And I know that it can be challenging because you are a woman and you are already undermined so much sometimes, depending on where you are, that asking for help might feel like you're confirming the things they're saying. And it doesn't have to be like that. So I think in trying to help other women, I am part of the network that I mentioned, the SEforALL, for support. And another thing that we do that it's not only related to women, but it's also related to youth, is that in the consultancy, we offer mentorship for new and young entrepreneurs. And that's something we do for free for the projects related to energy sector or related to democratizing renewable energy access in Brazil. But I think another way of helping, and I've been trying to do that ever since that episode happened, is actually to talk about it openly, because I feel like sometimes, and when people look at you and see that you have a company or that you have a position at an association or whatever it is, it's almost like you're untouchable, and or that nothing happens to you. And when you actually express and share your vulnerabilities as well, it makes it easier to humanize, but also for the other person that somehow is still starting the path to understand that that thing that it's happening to her or to him isn't because of who he or she is. It's because of the culture and the system we're in. And that's something we need to disrupt. So I think it can be reassuring as well.
Absolutely. I so appreciate that. And as I mentioned before, we at SEforALL are trying to work on creating more of a global network. It can be also challenging to find networks in your communities, but especially as we're looking at this global challenge of energy access and sustainable energy transitions, how do we find kind of that safe, now virtual space for us to share those stories and the encouragement that I think is necessary. But I want to get back to the energy piece a little bit because, I have days where being a woman feels very difficult. I have days where the future of our climate feels very difficult. And so there's kind of a dual challenge that we're working on in our daily lives. But I wanted to ask you both, kind of looking to the future, despite all the things we talked about, what makes you most optimistic about the work that you do? Whether it has something to do with being a woman in this sector or not, but how are you kind of looking towards the next few years of our sustainable energy kind of runway and timeline? Maybe we'll keep up the Victoria if you want to go first, and then Barbara.
All right, thank you. So for me, what excites me the most is the fact that I see progress. Even though there are little steps, we're heading somewhere, we're moving forward. We're not where we used to be. So there are projects that have gone on to affect millions of lives. And those are lives who, prior to that project about 5-6 years ago, they didn't have any access. And we're not talking about, just thousands, I'm talking about millions of lives being impacted. So for me, what's really exciting is seeing that progress is being made. As to if that progress is going to meet up with the 2030 target is what's not clear yet, but it's certain that we're not stuck in one position, we're moving. And that's really what gives me hope going forward.
I think I do have to say that being a Brazilian, it's not that easy to find hope. There's some days, given the current country situation. But I think overall in the energy sector, something that actually gives me a lot of hope, it's not only to see that it makes sense. Simply, I remember when I was still a volunteer for Greenpeace and we were campaigning for renewables like 2005. And we actually had to explain it only based on the environment or whatever, because it didn't make economical sense. And now I feel like there's already awareness that we need to shift because of the climate, but it makes sense. So, so I think seeing that the pieces are finally coming together, it's something that gives me a lot of hope that we will transition. And other thing that gives me that I think it's a bit related to me being a woman, but also being young, it's seeing how many young people are actually interested in the renewable energy sector, and how much the sector it's open to embrace such interest. So I think I do believe that sometimes it's difficult when you have a structure that it's settled for so long. And we see that in the energy sector in Brazil, it's difficult to bring new things and new technologies and new ideas on. So I think refreshing up a bit people that work in the sector, it's also that will help foster this transition. And of course, all this interest that we see, it's essential for that. So I think that keeps me very positive.
Those are fantastic points. And I didn't mean to phrase my question in such a negative way, because I think there are so many days where you see encouraging progress, yes, and lots of times to get excited. I'm curious, and folks, feel free to continue adding questions. I'll kind of riff on some of the comments I'm seeing as we go. I'm curious, you both come from such, well, one sort of male dominated, but also kind of traditional sectors of engineering and law, and working in very different aspects of the energy transition. Do you have words of advice, encouragement for perhaps young women or young people in general looking to get involved in energy in your field, whether that's, yeah, engineering, law, policy. Victoria, sorry, I'll pick on you and ask you to go first again.
I was just going to say Barbara should go first this time, so I'm not just saying all the points before she gets it.
That's good.
Okay, so I think my my suggestion for young people in general would be just really start, just get started. If you want to work in the sector, and I know that might seem difficult, or it might feel like I don't know where to start, or I cannot find an opportunity in the sector. But again, I think we live in a society today that offers so many opportunities for you to position yourself as a professional in the field without necessarily working at a company already or something. And I think if I look at people that are starting now, and I feel like, you know, if I could go back 10 years ago, maybe, you know, maybe I would have started some things earlier than I did. So I think just start and get things going, and eventually it won't be perfect. There will never be the perfect timing or the perfect job opportunity, but it's important that you already start to get experience and to actually understand what the fields mean. And I think for women or other people that somehow face some kind of challenge because of who they are, the sector, I think my piece of advice, it's just to try to remember that it's never about you. It's and I know that sounds like a cliche, but it is indeed about more about the other person than about you. And then again, try to find someone that can support you in reminding that when things get hard, because eventually they will, but having that person will help you get through it as well.
So I would say for females or people in general who are interested in sort of contributing to the energy sector, don't feel restricted to or to a particular field. So don't think because you're not a lawyer or because you're not an engineer, you can't. You could be an architect, you could be in policy making, you could be in any aspect, so long as you're passionate about energy access and getting more people to have access to sustainable, reliable, and modern energy sources. There's so many areas you could, you know, tap into to sort of reach or help to reach that target. So you could be even an environmentalist. I mean, there's so many areas you could sort of contribute to the energy SDG 7 targets. So yes, don't feel restricted. And if you need help, if you need sort of assistance, do reach out to people who have gotten to a certain level and sort of find out. Don't be afraid to ask or sort of get information as to where best you feel like you can plug in.
Thank you. I think, yeah, another point will just be to remind folks of the words of Damilola earlier this morning, who really requested that we look to government as well as one of those venues for a place to be able to make change in this sector and have a large impact. I will, let's see if we have questions. Okay, yeah, so we have some non-engineering, non-lawyer folks in the chat, and that also includes me, so thank you for widening that scope. I also just want to let everyone know we probably have time for one more question, so if anyone has a pressing one, please feel free to include it in the chat while we wait for the next fantastic question. I'll just say, you know, to also echo some of the words we heard this morning, that this is the start of a conversation that we're having, whether it's today, over the next 3 days, but also hopefully for years to come. So I'm hoping that everyone in this call will kind of follow along with SEforALL as we build out our Women at the Forefront network, with both of you, with some of the groups and communities that you mentioned, and we can really start cementing this safe space, this network for mentorship and guidance. But we'll have one more question. So from Laura. All right, okay, they're flooding in. So let's see if we can group these. So Laura asked, do you have any advice on how to balance your current job with growing and studying and learning new skills? I think this is a fantastic question, especially for people at the start or kind of in a mid-level of their careers. How do you keep doing the work and doing what you need to do to progress and grow? Barbara, do you want to take that one first?
Yes, however, I have to be honest, and the first thing that came to my mind is I was actually never good at keeping balance. So I was always a workaholic and then just studying many hours. I think, well, I think first is a question of alignment, but it's also a question of trying to understand that it's okay if you cannot find that balance for a certain period of time. I mean, I think it's not okay not to have that balance at all throughout your life. But if it's okay if you cannot find it. When I was in college, I used to work as a waitress and throughout the night. And I had only had 2 hours of sleep before I had to go to college. And of course that wasn't balanced, but that was like what I needed to do. So I think, again, I think it's okay if you don't have balance. So don't be too hard on yourself trying to find balance in all aspects of your life. And then I think it's a matter of also organizing your tasks and organizing your time as well. I think that can help. I was always fond of those. You have several of them, organizations, methodologies in which I, for example, I try to read 2 books a month, and then I set a set number of pages that I read X times a day, and therefore. But I think if you're also at a company, and I know that decision isn't up to many of you, but it could be interesting, even if you're as an intern, to actually challenge your leader a bit, not in a bad way, but also provoke about the importance of companies actually making time and space for employees to do that themselves and to grow themselves. So I think that's another discussion that it's important to have if you are in the private sector, for example, or any company at all, or if you are thinking about your business. I'm sorry, I don't have a more concrete piece of advice, but I was like, if you know, ping me. I'm counting on you, Victoria.
No, Barbara, I think you've pretty much touched on everything. Yes, there's never going to be enough time to study and work at the same time. But then, yeah, you're not going to find balance every time, like Barbara said. And also, I think in my presentation, I mentioned that it's important to sort of find organizations that are willing or looking to also build future leaders, and that their values also align with yours, because that way, if your values are learning and development, then if that organization is also passionate about that, then you wouldn't really have a lot of contradiction of ideas as to growing and working at the same time. So yes, pretty much just try and balance it as much as you can, but you might not be able to achieve absolute balance.
Absolutely. I think, any blog post on working life and the stressors includes some conversation about balance, and this is a never-ending journey. Maybe I'll add one thing I found over many years that helped me was really understanding the way I take in information. So I was spending hours just reading documents and trying to understand things, and finally realized that I actually get a lot more out of having conversations with folks and learning in that way. So that one saved a lot of time and stress, but also allowed me to seek out opportunities for my style of learning and growth.
You're right, Hannah. I'll just touch on that. So I love reading. I love to sort of see other people's perspective as to how they see life. And we all know there's no one book that takes an hour or 2 to read. But then I started to seek out other methods. So first it was YouTube videos that sort of explain that book and what's in that book. And then now you have many applications that sort of assist you to read a book in 30 minutes. And so, yes, you can find all the sort of methods or time management ways to sort of also develop and not spend as much time.
Absolutely. But I think, gosh, if we could end on any note, it would be that you should also see, you know, find your place and an organization and a company that also wants to support your growth and help you progress as a leader, and how absolutely critical that is. I can't recall, shoot, who said it now this morning, maybe it was Nilufar, our Master of Ceremonies, that this year, unlike maybe any other, has just made it so clear how important young voices are in so many of our global challenges. But you know, today we're talking about energy access. So there are places that are recognizing this and the importance of your voice, and we should definitely be supporting them with our employment. Gosh, time is going so quickly, but okay, fantastic. No more pressing questions. I will maybe give you each 1 minute to offer kind of last thoughts. I know we could stay here and talk for quite some time, but maybe just to close us out, I'll turn it back over to you both. Victoria, okay, you unmuted first, sorry.
Did I beat you to it, Barbara? Okay, so I think what I'll say in the end is, since this is a sort of call to females, whether in engineering or not, is that see these global issues as problems that need solving, and also see that it's important for you to bring that perspective of yours, like a female's perspective, to the table in solving these problems. So however that you feel that you can fit into that position, be you an architect, an engineer, or lawyer, if you feel like you have sort of solutions, just bring it to the table. Don't hesitate, because you cannot leave it to everyone else to sort of decide what your future would look like, because in the end, whatever we're able to come up with, the kind of solutions that we develop would affect all of our futures, and you do have the opportunity to participate or contribute to that.
And I think just adding to that, what I would say is a piece of a call to action for females is believe in the difference that you can make, because you have, each one of us have a unique perspective of the challenges that we face globally and locally as well. And this unique perspective is important and sometimes essential to be able to find the best solution for an issue that a group of people that usually look the same and feel the same and are the same won't be able to have, because they don't have diversity in their fields. There are already several studies that show how companies that have women in leadership positions solve issues better, solve problems better, and actually perform better because of diversity of perspective. So believe that. And when you find yourself with a challenge that you want to tackle, and sometimes you feel that it's too big, something that I find it's very important for me is just to try to break down that big challenge in as many little pieces as you can, and choose to first address a very small piece of them and then the other one, until like you're putting together a puzzle, but the other way around. So I think that would be my call to action.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much. I know we're running a little bit over time, but I just really want to acknowledge your thoughtful responses and for sharing your stories with us today. Excuse me. I think we could talk for hours. We could have a whole summit on this conversation, but I want to make sure everyone has enough energy to come back tomorrow and join us for the events tomorrow and then the day after. So I will thank all of our participants for your participation and your questions today. I know we didn't get to get a good sense of where everyone's joining us from, but this is absolutely a global challenge with requiring global solutions, and we can't wait to keep this conversation going. Maybe my last point will be to just emphasize that I hope now we are your network of folks that care about gender equality in energy access. So please stay in touch with us, whether that's through email, following along on social media, coming back tomorrow, learning more. But we are here for the continued conversation that I should have emphasized this at the very beginning, is not just for women, and we really appreciate all of the advocates for energy access that care about gender equality, wherever you come from and however you identify. So hopefully that includes lots of people in this group. I haven't had a chance to kind of read down the list. Yeah, I hope we will see you tomorrow morning. Please do stay in touch. I will thank our sponsors again, and both of our speakers, Victoria and Barbara, thank you so much. We'll go ahead and close the session today, and look forward to staying in touch.